Hello, good morning, ladies. This is the summary of our discussion for world religion this last week. So, last time we talked about religion per se, and we said that religiosity can be explained as number one, a person's inclination to know the divine. Number two, it's a fidelity towards a certain ideology and subscription to a set of rituals and purposive action. And number three, we said it is loyalty to a certain prescribed set of norms or tradition. Now, if you can recall in our discussion this week, I presented to you three, no, I don't think it's just three, but four pictures. Okay? So I presented to you the pictures of Ishtar, the picture of Isis, the picture of Artemis, and later on, the picture of the Virgin Mary. And we know very well that these pictures represent people's belief across various historical periods. For example, Ishtar is a representation of the Mesopotamian belief in the goddess of fertility, motherhood, abundance, and that existed around 5,000 to 6,000 years ago. That's quite distant from us right now. We know also that Isis is the same. But for the Egyptians, she's also the goddess of fertility, motherhood, solicitude, mercy. And that's 5,000 to 6,000 years ago also. Quite distant from us right now. Very far. And finally, I introduced to you the image of Artemis. It's a pre-Christian deity who is revered for her benevolence, solicitude, her love for her children. That's why in the image I presented to you, she is with big breasts in order to nurse her children. Now, why did I present this to you? Remember, my emphasis is that across historical periods, even if people are coming from different cultures and backgrounds, there is only there is a commonality in their desire, in their hopes, in their aspirations. And that is the recognition of themselves as what? Vulnerable. They are weak and they are seeking a woman or perhaps a figure who can support them in this vulnerability. Thus, it is a collective idea of their desire to control nature because nature confronts them with their vulnerability that leads them to death. So, realizing that they are vulnerable, that they are weak, they need to do something about it. And so, across historical periods, across cultural contexts, across different backgrounds, you realize man shares the same insecurity, the same anxiety of vulnerability, weakness that leads them to the realization of dying. Okay? Now, did we lose it because we are already Christians right now? No. You remember in the discussion, we don't have any more Ishtar, we don't have any more Isis, we don't have any more Artemis, but we have the Virgin Mary, who is now the personification of a virtuous woman who is there to help her children, who is there to keep them grounded, to provide for their needs. She is the loving and merciful mother. So, one point I would like you to remember in our discussion this week, regardless of what background man is from, he is confronted by that uniform anxiety of vulnerability, weakness, limitation, and death. Okay? Now, in the modern time, perhaps this understanding of limitation had drastically changed. But not in the essence, only in the expression and the form, but not the essence. Perhaps people now are not just confronted with the idea of death. Perhaps people now are confronted with their desire for liberty, for expression, for acceptance, for tolerance, human rights, LGBT equality. Perhaps those are our preoccupation now. But at the heart of that, we go back to man seeking security amidst all these fears that make him think he cannot survive. He cannot live beyond death. Now, so let me just emphasize that again. Number one, regardless of where we are situated, regardless of our cultural background, man will always be confronted with the idea of death. And because he is confronted with the idea of death, the idea of weakness, vulnerability, and limitation, he will always aspire. He will always aspire to take control. He will always aspire to take control. And perhaps that is what is religion. That is what religion is about. To take control. Now, if we will go back, I was not able to mention this in our discussion explicitly. Religion is defined as, well, religion is from the root word religare. Religare. There are two meanings to it. Number one, to fasten back. To fasten back. And what is that? To fasten what was lost. To recover what was lost by man because of his vulnerability, because of his weakness, because of his givenness to his appetites, because of his givenness to temptation and to sin. So religion is to recover what was lost. And so you see, religion is man taking control of his nature. Number two, what is religion? Religion is going back to God. Going back to God. And technically, that unites itself, that definition unites itself with the other definition of going back to what was lost. And what was lost? That man is primarily a religious being. Homo religiosus. And how do we convince ourselves? How do we prove that indeed man is Homo religiosus? Just imagine, even before the creation of civilization, even before the creation of formalized ways of life, the cities, man 40,000 years ago, the early Cro-Magnon, they were living in a nomadic way of life, but they had this tendency, they had this preoccupation of burying their dead. Well, if you are still in a barbaric way of life, that is from moving from one place to the other in search for food, in order for you to feel secure, it is not necessary for you to bury the dead. Okay? But since these people have this higher consciousness that they are not just body but also spirit, they need to bury the body of the dead so that the spirit enjoys a continuation of life, not just here, but in the life after. So that is technically a proof that man is really Homo religiosus. Another thing, let me prove to you. Do you recall our discussion? Do you recall the pictures I presented? The cave paintings at Lascaux. The image, the figurine of Venus of Willendorf. Okay? Or the different burial sites. So in other words, people are awed. People are awed by the greatness and the magnitude that is beyond them. Why did the people in prehistoric France, particularly in Lascaux, painted the walls of the cave with these particular animals? Why did they not paint cats or dogs or the cute birds? Why? Because these animals, aside from being eaten by them, represents the very superior power that they are at awe of. They are filled with wonder by these animals. And so they want to capture that sense of awe. So Homo religiosus, man is technically connecting with God. Man is technically filled with wonder, filled with amazement that he is limited and there is someone greater than him who can do all of these things. And technically, ladies, later on with the formalization of religion, it became an integral part in the creation of civilization. When you say civilization, these are highly sophisticated ways of life. So unlike the previous ways of living these people had, that is foraging and hunting, nomadic way of life, moving from one place to the other, civilization is technically being settled in a place. And because being settled in a place, they now are living in a more sophisticated mentality and consciousness. It's higher. How is that manifested? There is government, there is education, there is social stratification. If you remember the Banner of Ur, and what does that mean? The Banner of Ur means that people are assigned different tasks in society. Now, aside from stratification, people also have leisure. They are not just there moving from one place to the other in search of food. They can now enjoy rest. They can now enjoy arts. They can now enjoy history. They can now think about what to do after. They have now a sense of time. Now, in all of this, government, education, commerce, infrastructure, stratification, leisure, the most poignant, powerful element that shape all of this is religion. Who is in control of government? The one chosen by God. What is studied in education? Truth revealed and upheld by religion. How are people assigned tasks and goals in society? According to their dignity as creatures of God. Meaning, if you are an artisan or a worker, it means that God perhaps decided that you will just be of a lower rank and that you will have to render work in order for the community to stay organized. But if you are into the clerical state, you are a priestly class, meaning you are in the topmost level of the strata, perhaps God chosen and elected you to become that. Now, again, let me emphasize my major points. Number one, across historical periods, man share the same predicament. He is vulnerable. Number two, because of this vulnerable, he resorts to religion. He resorts to religion in order to control nature that exposes and confronts his vulnerability. Number three, man is homo religiosus, and it's evident in his history, in his practices, in his being awed of nature. And number four, religion technically made an impact on the creation of organized living conditions. Now, if man shares the same predicament across historical periods, across cultural contexts, it means that there is a high probability that the religious traditions man subscribed to may also be the same. If you can recall, the reasons why man, even if he is from different places, share some similarities in their religious practices. There are, if you can recall, the 5 concepts. The first concept is man tends to represent God according to how he thinks God will be best understood by him. That's anthropomorphism. God is not represented as somebody alien. God is not represented as somebody detached from his experience. Rather, God is represented as someone who is very much connected to his daily struggle, to his daily preoccupation, to his daily fears. Kaya nga, ladies, remember, in the story, in the Greek mythology, the gods were not omnipotent. They were not omniscient. They were not perfect. No? In the Greek mythology, the gods were given to their feelings of jealousy, vanity, love, affirmation, and security. Remember, Aphrodite, she was given to her vanity. Hera, she was given to her jealousy. Zeus, he was given to his promiscuity. Remember, if this is God, If these are images of God, representations of God, why are they given to this? Well, technically, because they are represented, captured by man according to his image tree, according to how he understood his life to be. Another thing, it's very important to note that man uses his own language to convey the message of what these gods are. And you realize, ladies, language is a human invention. Another reason why there are similarities is of diffusion. Diffusion. There is movement. From one place to the other, the religious practices of one place is brought to another place. But it is not just being brought. Eventually, the bringing of practices from one place to the other, the place where it is settled or brought to, the people there take it as their own. They approximate it according to their needs, according to their culture. And what is culture? If you describe what culture is how man justifies himself, how man justifies his existence. So perhaps religion was created in this particular culture, it was brought to this particular culture, two different justifications of how man lives, and so there should be approximations, there should be adjustments, there should be changes. And so you see, even if there are similarities, now we are looking at differences. Number 3, there is also the concept of euhemerism. Euhemerism, what is that? The idea that the God that we subscribe to, the divine, used to be like us. They are men who, because of their virtue and goodness, were rewarded. They were given rewards and they became God. Okay? Now, how is that? Explaining similarities. Imagine, man across various continents, man across various places and localities, all subscribe to that same idea of what virtue is. Virtue is necessarily the good, the truth, and the beautiful. So, perhaps these people, they live truthful lives, good lives, and beautiful lives. However, ladies, in the end, we see the distinction between monotheism and polytheism. Of course, we know what monotheism is. Monotheism is the belief in one God. Polytheism believes in many gods. But if you look at it, there is a common underlying unity between monotheism and polytheism. That God is being. That God exists. So when you say polytheism, God is many, how is that? Because we find it difficult to understand how can God be God of contradiction? How can He be God of life and then God of death? How can He be God of abundance and then God of scarcity? Now, in order to reconcile this irony in our mind, we thought of God as this and God as this. Perhaps He is binary. But then again, in the end, you see that despite this binary, there is only one being. That this binary is a continuity, a process giving birth to something. And when you look at it, it's not compartmentalized. Birth does not end in birth. It continues to death. But death is not the end of it. It is part of a holistic whole. Death may lead us to living again. And so, ladies, I hope that through this video, you will be able to remember our discussions in world religion. That man is vulnerable, man seeks control, man, despite his being vulnerable, is still hoping to be one with God because he is homo religiosus, and it is natural in him. Religion is useful in the creation of organized societies, and these organized societies manifest to us commonalities in our religious expressions. I think I discussed also yesterday to you, this previous week, what inculturation is. Inculturation is very much explained by how people appropriate religion for themselves. I explained that already in diffusion. Ladies, please be ready for a quiz on Friday. I will be posting the quiz questions on Friday. So please take note of that. Goodbye.